She nursed a cowboy back to health unaware. He was the millionaire behind the town's only hospital. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Emma Brooks was a young nurse with a dream. She worked tirelessly at Westbridge Private Hospital, a small but well-respected facility in the heart of the town. Emma's life wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She had a modest apartment, a second-hand wardrobe, and a job she loved. But the weight of her responsibilities often felt heavy. Between working long shifts and juggling her student loans, she barely had time for herself. Still, Emma found solace in helping others, especially the patients who needed her the most. She had a soft spot for those who had no one else to care for them, and that's exactly how she found herself caring for Grant Carter. Grant was a man who had everything: money, power, influence, yet he was nothing more than a shell of himself when Emma first met him. A tragic car accident had left him in a coma for weeks, and his family, distant and cold, barely visited. He had become a nameless face on a hospital bed, but Emma was determined to change that. Every day, she would tend to him with gentle hands and a soft voice, unaware of the immense power he held. She would speak to him as if he could hear her, telling him about her day, her dreams, and even her struggles. Emma didn't expect anything in return. For her, it was just another part of the job. But what she didn't know was that Grant wasn't just a patient, he was the man behind the very hospital she worked for. He was the millionaire who owned it all. At first, Emma didn't notice the signs. She treated him like she treated every other patient, with care and dedication. But as the days passed, she began to feel a strange connection to him. She would catch herself hoping he'd wake up, if only to see his reaction to her presence. Still, Emma was determined to keep her professional boundaries intact. She never let herself get too attached, even though, deep down, a part of her couldn't help but wonder who he was and what had happened to him. Then one day, everything changed. After weeks of tending to him, Grant finally stirred. His fingers twitched, and then, ever so slowly, his eyes opened. The moment was surreal. The man she had been caring for all this time was awake. But something was different. He looked at her, as if trying to piece together the reality around him. His voice was weak, but there was a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure why, but something about this man, this patient, felt significant. For the next few days, Grant slowly regained his strength, but Emma's feelings for him deepened. She cared for him not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He was no longer just a patient. He was someone she felt a strange pull toward. What she didn't know was that Grant was feeling the same way. Despite his wealth and status, he found something real in Emma, something honest and pure. He hadn't experienced that in years, not since before the accident. But neither of them knew the full truth yet. They were about to uncover it, and it would change everything. One evening, a grand charity event was being held at the hospital. The staff, including Emma, were invited. She had no idea what to expect, but she was eager to attend, if only for a night of relaxation away from the hospital. As she entered the ballroom, her eyes scanned the room. The elegant decor, the clinking of glasses, the hum of conversations, it was all so foreign to her. Emma stood by the entrance, unsure of what to do next, when suddenly, a voice called out to her. "Emma!" She turned, her heart racing. It was Grant. But the man who stood before her now was no longer the quiet, vulnerable patient she had cared for. He was different, dressed in a sharp suit, his posture commanding, his eyes gleaming with confidence. "Liam Parker, guest of honor," he said with a smile, his tone warm yet distant. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her. This wasn't just any man. This was Grant Carter, the millionaire behind the hospital. The same man she had spent weeks caring for, unknowingly. Shock and confusion flooded her mind, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. But then her heart sank. The trust they had built, the connection they had shared, felt like it had just been shattered. How could he have kept this from her? Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Emma Brooks was a young nurse with a dream. She worked tirelessly at Westbridge Private Hospital, a small but well-respected facility in the heart of the town. Emma's life wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She had a modest apartment, a second-hand wardrobe, and a job she loved. But the weight of her responsibilities often felt heavy. Between working long shifts and juggling her student loans, she barely had time for herself. Still, Emma found solace in helping others, especially the patients who needed her the most. She had a soft spot for those who had no one else to care for them, and that's exactly how she found herself caring for Grant Carter. Grant was a man who had everything: money, power, influence, yet he was nothing more than a shell of himself when Emma first met him. A tragic car accident had left him in a coma for weeks, and his family, distant and cold, barely visited. He had become a nameless face on a hospital bed, but Emma was determined to change that. Every day, she would tend to him with gentle hands and a soft voice, unaware of the immense power he held. She would speak to him as if he could hear her, telling him about her day, her dreams, and even her struggles. Emma didn't expect anything in return. For her, it was just another part of the job. But what she didn't know was that Grant wasn't just a patient, he was the man behind the very hospital she worked for. He was the millionaire who owned it all. At first, Emma didn't notice the signs. She treated him like she treated every other patient, with care and dedication. But as the days passed, she began to feel a strange connection to him. She would catch herself hoping he'd wake up, if only to see his reaction to her presence. Still, Emma was determined to keep her professional boundaries intact. She never let herself get too attached, even though deep down a part of her couldn't help but wonder who he was and what had happened to him. Then one day, everything changed. After weeks of tending to him, Grant finally stirred. His fingers twitched, and then, ever so slowly, his eyes opened. The moment was surreal. The man she had been caring for all this time was awake, but something was different. He looked at her, as if trying to piece together the reality around him. His voice was weak, but there was a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure why, but something about this man, this patient, felt significant. For the next few days, Grant slowly regained his strength, but Emma's feelings for him deepened. She cared for him not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He was no longer just a patient. He was someone she felt a strange pull toward. What she didn't know was that Grant was feeling the same way. Despite his wealth and status, he found something real in Emma, something honest and pure. He hadn't experienced that in years, not since before the accident. But neither of them knew the full truth yet. They were about to uncover it, and it would change everything. One evening, a grand charity event was being held at the hospital. The staff, including Emma, were invited. She had no idea what to expect, but she was eager to attend, if only for a night of relaxation away from the hospital. As she entered the ballroom, her eyes scanned the room. The elegant decor, the clinking of glasses, the hum of conversations, it was all so foreign to her. Emma stood by the entrance, unsure of what to do next, when suddenly, a voice called out to her. "Emma!" She turned, her heart racing. It was Grant. But the man who stood before her now was no longer the quiet, vulnerable patient she had cared for. He was different, dressed in a sharp suit, his posture commanding, his eyes gleaming with confidence. "Liam Parker, guest of honor," he said with a smile, his tone warm yet distant. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her. This wasn't just any man. This was Grant Carter, the millionaire behind the hospital. The same man she had spent weeks caring for unknowingly. Shock and confusion flooded her mind, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. But then her heart sank. The trust they had built, the connection they had shared, felt like it had just been shattered. How could he have kept this from her? Emma stood frozen under the chandelier's glow, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses fading into a blur. Her mind replayed his words, Liam Parker, guest of honor. The name that echoed across the hospital's hallways, the one whispered in admiration by staff and patients alike. He was the man who funded the new pediatric wing, the man whose name was etched on the hospital's front plaque. Grant Carter, the cowboy she had nursed back to health, was in fact Liam Parker, the millionaire behind it all. Her breath hitched, her pulse racing. She forced a smile, murmuring, "Congratulations, Mr. Parker." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. then offered a polite nod before turning back toward a group of donors. For the rest of the evening, Emma felt invisible, standing among strangers dressed in silk and diamonds. She wanted to leave, but her feet would not move. Instead, she slipped quietly out to the terrace, the cool night air biting her skin. Her hands trembled as she gripped the railing, trying to make sense of it all. "You cared for a man, not a millionaire," she whispered to herself. But deep down, she felt betrayed. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. "Emma," his voice came, low and hesitant. She turned, her eyes filled with disbelief. "Why did you not tell me who you were?" she asked, her voice breaking. Liam sighed, stepping closer. "Because for once, I wanted to be seen as a person, not a name on a building." She shook her head. "You let me talk to you every night like you were someone ordinary. You let me believe we were equals." He met her gaze. "And I never lied to you. I just wanted to live in that illusion a little longer." The silence between them stretched. Finally, Emma whispered, "That illusion meant everything to me. You took that away." She turned and walked past him, her heels echoing on the marble floor. The next morning, she submitted her resignation letter. She packed her few belongings into a small box, her hands shaking as she folded her nurse's uniform one last time. The head nurse called after her, surprised, but Emma just smiled faintly and said, "It is time for me to move on." Outside, the sunlight was sharp, almost cruel. She walked past the hospital gates, her heart heavy but resolute. For days, she tried to forget him. She worked at a small clinic on the outskirts of town, treating ranchers, factory workers, and children who could not afford the hospital's bills. The pay was low, but her peace returned. She thought she had closed that chapter until one rainy afternoon, a familiar black SUV pulled up outside the clinic. She froze as Liam stepped out, holding an umbrella. He looked different, now less polished, more human. "You should not be here," she said softly. "You left without letting me explain," he replied. "I thought you said everything that night," she countered. "Not everything," he said quietly. "The hospital you worked in, it exists because of people like you. I built it after my mother died. She was a nurse, just like you. She believed that kindness could heal people long before medicine could. When I met you, I saw her again." His words hung in the air, fragile but sincere. Emma looked away, the rain soaking through her thin sweater. "You think a story like that can erase everything?" "No," he said, "but maybe it can remind you that not every truth is meant to hurt." He stepped closer, his voice softer now. "I still remember the way you talked to me when I could not even move. You gave me something no doctor or machine ever could hope. Let me help you build something that matters." Emma's heart wavered. She wanted to trust him, but fear held her back. "And what if I say no?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Then I will still keep this clinic running for you. You said once that people here deserve care, and I agree." For a moment, she saw him not as a millionaire or a patient, but as a man trying to make things right. The rain fell harder, but neither moved. Finally, she took a deep breath and whispered, "One step at a time, Liam. If you really mean it, show me." He nodded, eyes steady. "I will." And for the first time in weeks, Emma smiled not out of politeness, but from something deeper. A spark of belief, fragile yet real, flickered back to life. The next few weeks moved like slow thunder across the plains. Emma kept her focus on her patients, yet something inside her had shifted since that rainy afternoon. Liam kept his promise they did not interfere, but his presence was felt everywhere. New medical supplies began arriving at the small clinic, the leaking roof was repaired overnight, and a brand new generator appeared in the back, donated anonymously. But Emma knew, every quiet act of kindness carried the same invisible signature, his. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, painting the fields gold, Emma stepped outside to close the clinic. That was when she saw him again. Liam stood by the fence, holding a box of medical kits. He was wearing a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, his hair messy from the wind. He looked more like a ranch hand than a millionaire. "You still think I am here to buy forgiveness?" he asked gently, placing the box down. Emma folded her arms, trying not to smile. "Old habits die hard." He chuckled softly, the sound carried by the wind. "I do not want forgiveness, Emma. I just want a chance to help the people you care about," she sighed, looking at the horizon. "You already have. The clinic has never been this well stocked." "Then let me do more," he said. "There is land behind the hospital that no one uses. What if we turned it into a free outreach center? A place for people who cannot afford private care?" Emma blinked, caught off guard. You mean it? Every word, he replied. But I need someone who knows what these people really need. Someone like you. For a long moment she said nothing. The sun slipped lower, casting long shadows across the dirt road. If I agree, she said finally, it will not be because I believe in you. It will be because I believe in what we can build. Liam smiled, a quiet, grateful expression. That is enough for me. Over the next few weeks, they worked side by side. Emma handled patient records, local outreach, and community hiring, while Liam handled permits, funding, and logistics. Slowly, the old field began to transform. Wooden beams rose from the ground, concrete was poured, and a sign soon appeared. The Carter Community Health Center. But it was not just bricks and walls taking shape, it was trust. Each day, their conversations grew longer, easier. Sometimes they talked about medicine, sometimes about life. Liam shared stories from his past, how he grew up on a ranch outside town, how his mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and how her passing had left a hole he never managed to fill. When you first walked into that hospital room, he said one night, I was still trapped in that hole. You did not just wake me up, Emma. You reminded me that being alive is not the same as living. Emma listened in silence, her heart caught somewhere between admiration and fear. She had promised herself not to fall for him, but his honesty disarmed her. He was no longer the man on the hospital plaque. He was real. A few days later, a storm swept through the town. The wind tore shingles from roofs and flooded the roads. The clinic lost power mid-surgery, and Emma stayed behind to help the remaining patients. When the storm finally eased, she stepped outside exhausted, only to find Liam there, soaked and muddy, holding a flashlight. You should not be driving in this weather, she said. I was worried about you, he admitted. I brought backup power. He helped her connect the generator, his hands trembling from the cold. When it was done, they sat under the clinic's porch, rain dripping from the eaves. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm around them had quieted, but something else was growing, something louder, stronger, undeniable. Liam looked at her and said softly, You once said healing takes time. I am beginning to understand that. Emma met his gaze, the flicker of the generator light reflected in her eyes. Then take all the time you need, she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, but inside, something warmer began to take its place, a fragile beginning neither of them could ignore. By early spring, the new community health center was finally complete. The once empty land behind the hospital had become a place filled with life and laughter. Farmers brought their children for checkups, retired workers came for free consultations, and every corner of the building carried a sense of purpose. Emma could hardly believe how far they had come. Every morning, she arrived early to unlock the doors, the smell of fresh paint still lingering in the hallways. Liam would usually be there before her, already talking to contractors or helping unload supplies. Despite his wealth, he refused to stand apart from the workers. He carried boxes, painted walls, and sat with patients as if he were one of them. Watching him like that made something inside Emma soften, though she tried to hide it. You should not be lifting heavy things, she told him one morning, noticing his sleeves rolled up and his hands covered in dust. Old habits, he replied with a grin. My mom used to say work keeps a man humble. Emma smiled faintly. Smart woman. The smartest, he said, his eyes distant for a moment. She would have liked you, Emma. The warmth in his tone caught her off guard, and she quickly turned away, pretending to review a clipboard. You say that to all your nurses? He laughed softly. Only the ones who save my life. Days turned into weeks, and soon the center's opening ceremony approached. Reporters filled the lawn, photographers snapped pictures, and the mayor gave a speech about how kindness could build a town stronger than any fortune. Emma stood at the back, dressed in a simple blue dress, trying to stay out of the spotlight. When it was Liam's turn to speak, his voice carried through the crowd with quiet sincerity. This center was built in memory of my mother, who believed that compassion is the truest medicine, he said. But it also exists because of a woman who reminded me that healing starts with the heart. His gaze found Emma in the crowd, and for a brief moment it felt like everyone disappeared. Applause thundered around them, but Emma barely heard it. After the ceremony, as the guests began to leave, Liam walked toward her. You did this, he said softly. We did this, she corrected. He smiled, but before either could say more, a man in a tailored suit approached. Mr. Parker, the board is waiting for you in the office. There is a problem with the new investment report. Liam nodded, his face tightening. I will be there in a minute. He turned back to Emma. I will come find you after. But he did not come back that night or the next. Days passed, and the distance between them grew. Rumors spread through town that one of Liam's business partners had accused him of mismanaging hospital funds. Emma tried to ignore it, but the whispers became louder. One evening, as she locked the clinic, she found Liam waiting outside, his expression weary. Is it true? She asked quietly. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Someone forged my signature on several transactions. The board wants me to step down until it is investigated. But you did nothing wrong, she said. That does not matter, he replied. In this world, perception is everything. Emma looked at him, her chest tightening. So what happens now? Now I fight, he said. But I might lose everything. She stepped closer, her voice steady but full of emotion. You will not lose me. His eyes softened. You have no idea how much that means. For the first time, he looked vulnerable not as a millionaire, but as a man standing on the edge of everything he had built. The next day, the news broke across every local channel. Liam Parker under investigation. Cameras crowded the hospital gates, and reporters shouted questions. Emma stayed inside the clinic, refusing interviews, tending to her patients as usual. But inside, she was afraid. Not for his reputation, but for his heart. That night, she found him sitting alone in the half-lit office of the health center, staring at a framed photo of his mother. You told me healing takes time, she said softly. It also takes faith. He looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. What if faith is the one thing I am running out of? Emma walked closer, placing her hand gently over his. Then borrow mine. I have enough for both of us. He looked at her for a long moment, and then, for the first time in days, he smiled a small, tired, but genuine smile. Outside, the town lights flickered against the night sky, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of horses echoed across the fields, a quiet reminder that even after the storm, life always finds a way to heal. The following weeks tested everything Liam had built and everything Emma believed in. Reporters camped outside his mansion gates, cameras flashing, headlines twisting the story into something cruel. Millionaire. Behind the town's hospital, under investigation for fraud, one newspaper read. Emma watched from the clinic window as people whispered, some turning cold toward the man who had once been their hero. But she knew the truth. He had poured his heart into helping others, and now the very system he had uplifted was tearing him down. One evening, she found him in the barn behind his ranch, sitting beside an old horse, his suit jacket tossed carelessly over a hay bale. The cowboy had returned to his roots. You should not be here, he said without looking up. Neither should you, Emma replied, stepping closer. The clinic needs you, Liam. People still believe in what you started. He gave a small, bitter laugh. People believe what they read, Emma. And right now, they are reading that I am a thief. She sat down beside him, brushing dust from her skirt. Then let them. The truth will outlive the noise. He turned toward her, his eyes tired but still burning with the same spark she had seen when he first woke from his coma. You really think I can fix this? I do not think, she said softly. I know. The next day, Emma refused to stay silent. She spoke on local radio, defending Liam's name, sharing stories of the lives he had changed. Her words spread faster than any headline. Patients began to speak up too, farmers, single mothers, children, each one sharing how the health center had given them hope. The tide began to shift. At the same time, Liam worked with investigators, uncovering emails and false signatures that traced back to one man, Nathan Caldwell, a former business partner he had once trusted like a brother. It was Nathan who had manipulated accounts, siphoning money and framing Liam to cover his tracks. When the truth finally surfaced, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Emma waited outside the conference room, her hands clasped tightly. Minutes felt like hours until Liam emerged. His eyes met hers, and for the first time in months, they were clear. It is over, he said, his voice trembling with relief. They cleared my name. Before she could speak, he added quietly, and Nathan has been arrested. Emma exhaled, tears she did not realize she was holding spilling down her cheeks. I told you, she whispered. The truth always wins. The following week, the hospital released an official statement clearing Liam of all accusations, and the town that had once doubted him now lined the streets to welcome him back. But Liam had changed. He no longer spoke about money or power. He spoke about purpose. "The heart of this town does not beat in its bank accounts," he said at the reopening ceremony. "It beats in the people who choose kindness over judgment." Emma stood behind him, proud but quiet. After the speeches, he approached her beneath the oak tree by the health center. "You were the only one who stood by me when everything fell apart," he said. "Because you stood by everyone else first," she replied. "That is what you taught me." He smiled, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small silver locket. Inside was a photo of his mother and a folded note. "She used to wear this every day," he said softly. "I think she would want you to have it." Emma shook her head. "Liam, I cannot—" "You can," he interrupted gently, "because you remind me of her. Her strength, her heart." She took it, her fingers brushing his. For a moment, the world around them faded. "So what now?" she asked quietly. "Now," he said, looking out across the fields, "we build again. Together." The sunset bathed them in gold, the air still and full of promise. And as the first lights of the town began to flicker on, Emma realized something she had not before. The man she had once nursed back to health had healed her in ways she never expected. Sometimes the greatest miracles were not found in hospitals or headlines, but in the quiet moments when two broken hearts decided to start over. The summer that followed felt like a second chance for everyone. The scandal was behind them, the hospital was thriving again, and the community health center had become the heart of the town. Every morning, Emma woke up before sunrise, brewed a pot of coffee, and headed out to the clinic where the waiting area was already filled with familiar faces. Liam would arrive not long after, usually carrying breakfast for the staff or boxes of donated medicine. It was hard to believe that the man once accused of fraud was now everyone's trusted friend. Yet for Emma, it was not his wealth or reputation that mattered. It was the way he treated people with respect, humility, and warmth. One afternoon, while sorting medical files, Emma heard laughter outside. She looked through the window and saw Liam surrounded by children, helping them plant flowers in the garden behind the center. He wore jeans and an old cowboy hat, a streak of dirt across his cheek. For a moment, she just watched, smiling to herself. When he noticed her, he tipped his hat and called, "You going to help or just supervise?" She rolled her eyes playfully and walked outside. "I thought you were supposed to be in a meeting with the mayor," she said. "I was," he replied, kneeling to pat soil around a sunflower, "but I figured this was more important." Emma laughed softly. "You are impossible, and yet you are still here," he teased. They worked side by side, the afternoon sun casting long shadows over the field. As the day faded, they stood back to admire their work rows of yellow blooms swaying gently in the wind. "It is beautiful," Emma said quietly. "It is home," Liam replied. His words hung in the air, and for a second, neither of them moved. She turned to him, her heart racing, but before she could speak, a car pulled up near the clinic. A man in a suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Parker, I am sorry to interrupt," he said, handing Liam a folder. "These are the final documents for the expansion project." Liam took them, flipping through the pages, but his expression shifted. "They are rejecting our proposal?" he asked. The man nodded. "The investors want to move the funding to another city. They think this town is too small to sustain long-term growth." Emma frowned. "But that project would bring jobs here." "It is what you promised the board," Liam sighed, closing the folder. "I know, but money talks louder than promises." Later that night, Emma found him at the ranch, sitting by the porch steps, the documents scattered beside him. The sound of crickets filled the air, and the moonlight painted his face with silver light. "You are not used to losing, are you?" she said softly, sitting beside him. He gave a small smile. "I am getting better at it." "Then why does it still hurt?" He looked at her, his voice quiet. "Because for once, I was not fighting for profit. I was fighting for people." She reached out, resting her hand on his arm. "You already won that battle, Liam. Maybe not on paper, but in here," she said, placing a hand over his chest. He stared at her for a long moment, his gaze tender. "You know, I used to think success meant owning everything I touched. Now I realize it means building something that can live without me." Emma smiled. "Then stop carrying it all alone." "I do not know how," he admitted. "Then let me show you," she whispered. Silence settled around them, the kind that said more than words ever could. The wind rustled through the fields, and somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of the town blended with the sound of their breathing. Liam finally turned to her, his voice steady. "Emma, when I first met you, I thought you were just another nurse. But you are the reason I am still standing." She felt her throat tighten, her eyes glistening under the porch light. "And you are the reason I learned how to believe again." Neither moved, but the space between them felt charged alive. And when Liam finally leaned in, their lips met softly, like a promise sealed by every storm they had weathered together. It was not a grand moment with music or applause, but something quieter, deeper, more real. Just two people who had saved each other in ways neither of them could have planned. When they pulled away, Emma whispered, "So, what now, Cowboy?" He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now we ride into tomorrow, one heartbeat at a time." And under the Texas moonlight they did. The days that followed felt different, lighter somehow, as if the town itself breathed easier. The health center thrived under Emma's care, and Liam split his time between the ranch and the hospital board, balancing the life of a businessman with the heart of a cowboy. People had begun to see him not as the millionaire who once owned half the county, but as one of their own. Still, even in peace, challenges had a way of finding him. Late one afternoon, while Emma was reviewing patient charts, a young boy stumbled into the clinic. His clothes were dusty, his face pale. "Ma'am," he gasped, "my daddy fell out near the old quarry." Without hesitation, Emma grabbed her medical bag and called out to Liam, who was helping repair a fence outside. Within minutes, they were in his truck, speeding down the dirt road, dust swirling in the rearview mirror. When they reached the quarry, the scene took her breath away. A man lay pinned beneath a fallen beam, unconscious, but breathing faintly. "We have to lift it," Liam said, jumping out. "Careful," Emma warned, kneeling beside the man. "We move it wrong, we could make it worse." Liam braced his arms against the beam, his muscles straining, the veins in his neck standing out. "Now, Emma," he grunted. Together, they freed the man and pulled him to safety. Emma worked quickly, checking his pulse and stabilizing his leg. "He will make it," she said at last, wiping sweat from her forehead. Liam smiled faintly, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. "You never stop amazing me," he said quietly. "Neither do you," she replied. They rode back to town with the injured man in the back seat, the boy clinging to his father's hand. The moment they returned, the townsfolk gathered, watching as Emma and Liam carried the man inside. By nightfall, word had spread through every corner of the community. "The cowboy and the nurse saved another life," they said. But for Emma, it was more than just another rescue. It was a reminder of how far they had come, two strangers bound by chance, now building a legacy together. Later that evening, as the clinic lights dimmed, Liam found her sitting alone on the porch steps, the Texas sky wide and full of stars. "You should be resting," he said softly. "So should you," she countered with a small smile. He sat beside her, the wood creaking under their weight. "You know, when I was lying in that hospital bed, I thought my life was over," he said. "I had money, power, everything a man could ask for, but no reason to fight. Then I opened my eyes, and there you were." Emma felt her throat tighten. "You do not owe me anything, Liam." "You are wrong," he said, turning to her. "I owe you everything. You gave me back my life, and somewhere along the way, you became it." Her heart raced. But before she could respond, headlights appeared in the distance. A black car pulled up, and a man in a dark suit stepped out. "Mr. Parker," he said briskly. The investors reconsidered. "They want to reopen talks about the expansion on your terms." Liam looked surprised. "After all this time?" "They saw what you built here. They want to be part of it." Emma watched him, her heart swelling with pride. "This is your chance," she said. "Our chance," he corrected. "I want you with me every step." She laughed softly. "I am a nurse, not a board member." "You are more than that," he said, his voice steady. "You are the heart of this entire place." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of cicadas. Then Liam stood, extending his hand. "Come on, Emma. We have work to do." She took it, their fingers intertwining effortlessly, and together they walked toward the glowing clinic, toward the future they had built with their own hands. As they reached the door, Liam paused, glancing back at the horizon. "You know," he said, smiling faintly, "my mother used to say some angels wear scrubs instead of wings." Emma chuckled softly. "And some cowboys wear suits instead of hats." They shared a look warm, knowing, unspoken. It was not the end of their story, but the beginning of something even greater. A love that had been tested, healed, and made stronger by every scar it carried. Autumn arrived gently, turning the Texas fields into a sea of gold and amber. The health center had become the pride of the town, and for Emma, it was more than just a workplace. It was a living reminder of everything they had built together. Liam had finalized the expansion deal, but this time, he refused to let it become just another business project. Every brick, every wall, every decision had Emma's touch on it. She managed the clinic's operations while he oversaw the construction of the new wing, and for the first time, they worked not as employer and employee, but as equals. Yet even as life settled into a rhythm, change was quietly approaching. One evening, Emma stood by the clinic window, watching the sunset paint the sky orange. Liam walked in, his hat in hand, looking more serious than usual. "You are quiet tonight," she said. "That is usually my line," he replied, smiling faintly before growing somber. "Emma, there is something I need to tell you. The investors want me to move to Houston for a year to oversee the expansion. It is the only way to make sure the new branch keeps our promise to this town." The words hit her harder than she expected. "Houston?" she repeated softly. "That is 4 hours away." He nodded. "I know, but this could change everything. Not just for us, but for every small town that needs a place like this." Emma turned away, staring out at the horizon. "You always talk about building something that lasts," she said quietly. "But you never think about what happens when you leave." Liam stepped closer. "I am not leaving you, Emma. I am just trying to build a bigger dream for both of us." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "Then why does it feel like goodbye?" He reached for her hand, but she gently pulled away. "Do what you need to do, Liam. I will keep things running here." For the first time, silence hung between them, not from comfort, but from fear of losing what they had. The next morning he left before sunrise. The sound of his truck faded down the dirt road, leaving Emma standing by the porch, holding the silver locket he had given her months before. The days that followed were long and quiet. She buried herself in work, focusing on her patients and the community that depended on her. Letters came every week from Houston updates about the project, sketches of the new building, sometimes just a note that said, "I miss home." But no matter how often she read them, the empty space beside her bed never felt smaller. One night, a terrible storm swept through the town. Power lines fell, trees cracked, and the clinic roof began to leak again. Emma gathered the patients who had taken shelter inside, calming frightened children and tending to the elderly. As the storm raged, she whispered to herself, "We have been through worse. We will get through this too." Then suddenly, headlights cut through the rain outside. The door burst open, and there he was, Liam, soaked to the bone, breathless, his coat dripping water onto the floor. "You drove through this?" Emma gasped. "You could have been killed," he smiled weakly. "I could not sit there knowing you were fighting this storm alone." Before she could respond, he pulled her into his arms. For a moment, the thunder, the wind, and the chaos outside disappeared. All that remained was the warmth of that embrace. "You came back," she whispered against his chest. "I never really left," he said softly. When the storm finally ended, dawn broke over the soaked fields, and the first rays of sunlight streamed through the broken roof. The town gathered outside the clinic, grateful for safety, and Emma stood beside Liam, their hands intertwined. "You cannot keep doing this," she said, smiling through tears. "Running into storms. Then stop being the reason I chase them," he teased, making her laugh for the first time in days. As the townsfolk clapped and hugged one another, Emma looked at him and knew the truth she had been denying all along. This man was not just her partner in work or her savior in chaos. He was home, and for the first time, she let herself believe that love, like healing, was not found in calm weather, but in the courage to face every storm together. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the quiet hum of the morning. The sun rose slowly over the soaked fields, and the air smelled of rain and renewal. The clinic roof still dripped in places, but laughter filled the halls as volunteers swept water from the floor and served hot coffee to the townsfolk who had taken shelter overnight. Emma stood by the window, her hair still damp, watching as Liam helped an old farmer fix a broken window frame. He looked up at her and smiled, the kind of smile that carried every unspoken word they had been afraid to say. Later that week, the town gathered for the reopening of the community health center's new wing. The banner read, "The Carter Parker Wellness Center," named not just for Liam's contribution, but for the woman who had made it possible. Emma tried to protest when he told her about the name, But Liam had only said, "You gave this place its soul. It is only right that it carries your name too." That day, the air was warm, and the courtyard buzzed with life. Children ran through the crowd, volunteers passed out lemonade, and the local choir sang under the oak tree. Emma stood at the podium, her voice steady but her heart trembling with emotion. "This town has weathered storms before," she said. "But what matters is not the walls we build, it is the hands that hold them together. This place belongs to all of you, to every person who believes that kindness can change the world." Applause rose like thunder, and when she stepped down, Liam was waiting with that same proud, gentle look. "You did great," he whispered. "You still talk too much," she teased, and they both laughed. As evening fell, the crowd began to thin, leaving only the glow of lanterns swaying in the soft breeze. Emma and Liam walked toward the garden they had planted months ago. The sunflowers had grown tall, their golden faces turned toward the fading light. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" she asked. "A storm, a stranger, a hospital bed." Liam nodded. "And one nurse too stubborn to give up on me." She smiled softly. "I did not know I was healing the man who owned the place." "You were never healing my body," he said. "You were healing my life." For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the fireflies blink between the flowers. Then Liam took her hand, his thumb tracing the silver locket she wore. "Emma," he began, his voice low but sure, "I spent years trying to build empires, thinking that would make me whole. But the truth is, I found everything I ever needed right here with you." She blinked back tears, her heart swelling in her chest. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a simple gold ring glimmered in the lantern light. "This is not about wealth or hospitals or promises. It is about you and me, about every sunrise we have faced together. Will you marry me, Emma?" Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then she nodded, smiling through tears. "Yes, Liam. 1,000 times yes." The crowd that remained nearby erupted in cheers, but all Emma heard was the steady beat of his heart against hers. The next morning, the town woke to headlines that read, "The Nurse and the Millionaire, a love that healed a town." But for Emma and Liam, it was never about headlines or fortune. It was about the small moments, the shared laughter, the long nights, the belief that love could rebuild even the most broken hearts. Months later, under the same oak tree where they had once stood together during the storm, they exchanged vows in a small ceremony surrounded by friends, patients, and neighbors. As they danced beneath strings of lights, Liam whispered, "You know, I used to think miracles only happened in hospitals." Emma smiled up at him. "And now?" "Now I know they happen wherever you are." The night faded into starlight, and as the town celebrated around them, one thing became clear: the girl who once nursed a cowboy back to health had found not just love, but a forever home in his heart.